I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker, Lauren Miller. She's a professional golfer. Lauren is the first golfer I think we've had speak on any of our platforms. So it took us 2 years, but we found a really good one. She has a great story to share with us. She is a graduate from Mississippi State and SMU. I'm sorry, not graduate. She attended Mississippi State, graduated SMU. She also has a master's in sports administration and management, so very relevant. So please welcome Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel incredibly fortunate to have gotten to know you both through this process. So happy to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. All right, I'm going to get you to start off just by telling us a little bit about what golf has meant to you, what your journey looked like, where it's taken you, and just if you wouldn't mind, just ramble on and tell us what life is like trying to make it as a pro after competing in college.
Yeah, absolutely. Golf has been a part of my life for a long time. Picked it up when I was 6.5 years old. So I'm now 23. So my math is correct. That's 17 years. So it's definitely been a huge part of me. It has taken me to incredible places across the country. Started competing at age 9, and then went on my first college visit in 8th grade. So kind of like
Oh
got
my
that
gosh,
process
that's so
started.
young.
Yeah, started early.
Hey, before
Thankfully,
you
they've
go on,
changed the rules since then.
yeah, before you
But
go on, I actually have to ask, how does a 6-year-old get into golf? Like, how did you get on a golf course? Were your parents into
yeah,
it? Or
yeah, so pretty cool story. I was originally born in Ohio, but we moved to Florida right around that time. And I'm the youngest of five, but there's a pretty big age gap between all of us. So my next closest sibling is 6 years older, and we were enrolling at the Catholic school. So I was starting first grade, she was starting seventh grade, and my dad just happened to be in the office and overheard that they needed a golf coach. And though my parents didn't have a ton of golf background, they were like, we've coached other sports before, and so we know how to organize, and ultimately we can bring in someone who knows a little bit more about the technical side of things. And so I was obviously way too little, being in only first grade. But I was out there every day, and they had a set of clubs for me, and I just kind of immediately fell in love with it. Though I played other sports as well, I just kind of really gravitated towards golf, and they'd have to drag me off the putting green every day. And then yeah, just kind of stuck with it, and little did I know it would take me to some pretty crazy places, and ultimately here now. So
so does
yeah.
recruiting back, you said you took your first college visit in 8th grade. Did recruiting start that early for you?
It did, yeah. Obviously now the rules have changed a little bit, which I think is for the best. But yeah, coaches started looking at you seventh, 8th grade. I knew girls who committed in seventh and 8th grade. I didn't commit until my spring of my sophomore year of high school, but yeah, the process started really early. They were looking for kids to commit pretty early on and lock them
Wow.
down. But yeah, went to my first visit and kind of looked all over the South and ultimately landed on Mississippi State, which was great. I really enjoyed my 4 years there. Was fortunate enough to I went there a year and a half ahead. Took college classes in high school at a local college, and so I was able to do homeschool dual enrollment. And that was great for golf too, because it allowed me a lot of flexibility and able to travel on Fridays and be able to tee it up on Saturday, Sunday. So super thankful for my parents putting a lot of miles on a new van to get me to tournaments. But yeah, it definitely paid off as I was able to earn a scholarship to Mississippi State. And so I got my degree in sport administration from there in fall of 2020, and then was able to receive a master's in sport administration as well in August of 2022, which was pretty neat. While I was getting that master's, I took a PhD level gender and sport class, which I had no clue the relevance that was gonna hold. But yeah, super grateful for my time at Mississippi State. And then with COVID coming along, was able to play an extra year, transferred to SMU, and finished out my time which was awesome experience too. Totally different schools, but were both very helpful in my golf journey and definitely gave me a lot of appreciation for the sport. Met incredible people along the way, great experiences, highs and lows, as everyone knows, that's always a part of it. But sports in general and golf specifically has definitely meant a great deal to me, and it's given me some incredible opportunities getting to, play 5 years in college and have all of that paid for, receive 3 degrees. That doesn't happen without golf and the opportunity I had. So yeah, and then turned pro in September. So new
Did
professional,
you,
but
before
and
you
enjoying
jump
it too.
into the pro tour, did you play, so when you're on a college team, do the girls compete on the tour a bit in the summers that are
So
competing in
yeah,
college and that
typically
are on the women's team?
So typically, in between, years in college, you'll play in a lot of high level amateur events. However, there typically everyone plays in a qualifier for the US Women's Open, since that is a tournament that you can play as an amateur or a professional, and it is just a 1 day qualifier. And so if it's your day, then you have the chance to play against the best in the world. But yeah, you're typically playing quite a bit over the summer, but for the most part, it's amateur only events. However, there is kind of a few exceptions. If you do have the opportunity to play in a professional event, you absolutely jump on it because it's great experience.
Do they give things like wild cards occasionally or not really?
They do, yeah. There's things called sponsors exemptions. So if you're able to kind of get in touch with the right people, you're kind of able to let your resume speak for itself if you've had a great collegiate year, or if you just know the right people, then you have the opportunity to get to play either on the LPGA as well as the Epson Tour, which is the feeder tour to the LPGA. Then you can have opportunity play on to play in those events as well. So yeah,
Yeah, I
thankfully
know
there
that.
are decent amount of there are ways to do it. It's difficult. I'd say they're very coveted, those sponsor exemptions, because there's not a lot of them. Typically there's only 2 to 3 each week that are up for grabs. So it's very competitive.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like tennis. When they have those wild cards.
Yeah.
So what is life for you? How has life changed now that you're trying to make it on the pro tour? And what kind of commitment is that? What does the season look like? What was the adjustment?
Yeah, no, for sure. It was strange not going to class anymore. But some of it was similar in that golf is, though we do spend, 4 or 5 years in college on a team, it still is kind of heavily individual. Even when you're out there competing on your team, you're not getting to play alongside your teammates in competition. So, golf is still golf, but, obviously all of the attention and focus, goes towards being the best you can possibly in your sport. You're not having to worry about the academic piece. All of your attention and effort is towards how can I get better every single week, and which you are playing a lot. The off season is only normally for the months of November to January, even though there actually even are, if you're playing in Florida, there's even opportunities to play in November and January as well. So it's a very short off season. And then you're playing, probably 3 out of 4 weeks a month. So it's definitely intense. And yeah, for me, it's a lot of I'm either at the golf course or I'm at the gym, or as I'm starting out as a new pro, I also do some part-time caddying, just to make a little money on the side as well. So in fact, I had that this afternoon. So yeah, you're keeping busy, especially as a new pro. And on the women's side, the money isn't great when you first start out. So you're looking for any opportunity to kind of bring some income in, because it definitely goes a long way, and it's important as our tournaments aren't in where you live every week. You got to travel. You're either putting miles on a car, or you're hopping on a plane. So it's definitely a very expensive sport. But it's
Do
also
most of the
super
women
enjoyable. I
have
enjoy getting in trouble.
sponsorship? Do most of the women have sponsorships to help afford some of that? Or is the income that comes from playing on the tour, if you're at a relatively high level, is that enough to afford the travel and such?
Yeah, when you're first starting out, I'd say you become a little bit of a beggar. You're just kind of trying to reach out to anyone and everyone who might be willing to help here and there. It's definitely tough. I think a lot of girls are, you know, in the first few years either receiving support from parents or if they have family friends who have known them for a while and want to reach out. Or if you've just kind of made connections with different businesses, then all that helps. But there are a lot of girls who work part-time and have either remote jobs or just flexible hours doing things here and there to be able to, yeah, bring some income in because the lower level tours you're scraping by. It's not a lot of money. And then as you build up, obviously it gets better at each level. And then ultimately the girls that are on the LPGA, they're gonna have agents and sponsors and stuff to really help cover their expenses. But yeah, it's when you're first starting out, it's you're definitely in need of some support. Otherwise, you better hope you're playing great golf every single week.
Yeah. So the reason I'm trying to like paint this picture is that, you know, like there's a whole bunch of really talented young athletes that are coming out of school trying to make that cut into the LPGA and, you know, putting like major earnings for a job or, you know, the path to a career that's not golf on hold to try to chase down this dream. And you have been doing this, you know, just for the last, what, like year and a half, 2 years now?
September is when I turned professional, so this
Okay.
is still kind of new to me, but yeah, it's still
Well,
adds up.
and then
Quite a
you
bit.
ended up with firsthand experience competing against male golfer Haley Davidson on the NXXT tour, where you had been utilizing that as an opportunity to get onto the LPGA tour. It was a women's tour with an XX in the title, and but they were
Yeah.
at that time under USGA and LPGA rules that allowed Haley to compete against women, even though he is born man is manhood.
Yep.
So can you
Yep.
tell us a bit, how did you become aware that there was a male player competing with the women, and a little bit about your experience competing against him? Like, how did that unfold? What was it like mentally? When did you first become aware of it to your story?
Yeah. So I first became aware of Haley Davidson back in 2021. It was Haley's first event competing in the women's category. It was a qualifier for the US Women's Open, which I had touched on a little bit earlier as being the biggest women's professional golf event that you can possibly play in. And I had no clue who I was playing with until after the round. I was not aware that transgenders were allowed to compete in women's sports. It had, to my knowledge, it just wasn't seen in the news. Obviously, 2021 was pre Leah Thomas, so it just wasn't really publicized or known about. So I definitely noticed some things on the tee, like kind of a bigger stature, 6'1", deeper voice, would sometimes hit the ball 60 to 70 yards past me, sometimes 10 to 20 yards past me. And I found it strange, but at the same time, I'm thinking you have to be a woman to play in the US Women's Open qualifier was, what I'm thinking. So I just was like, okay, like this kind of is what it is. Not until after the round when I received a follow request from Haley and I started to look at this Instagram account and realized pretty quickly things were not as they seemed. Haley was very public about his transition and was kind of started to look and realized that Haley played on a men's college golf team. It was D3, but if you're playing on a college golf team, you've got some game, you've got some talent. And it's obviously a lower level, so wasn't, the best of the best, but obviously gone through male puberty, all this stuff. And so I was absolutely shocked and appalled. Both my parents were there that day. My brother was caddying, and we kind of looked at each other at dinner that night and kind of couldn't quite believe that this was something that had become acceptable. I knew obviously that Haley had gotten approval from the USGA to be able to play. And it was definitely disappointing to know that they had allowed this to happen. And so that was definitely who I was frustrated with, but you feel extremely helpless as just one golfer, when I understand how big the USGA is and all of the power and governance, they're as well as the LPGA. So I didn't really know what to do. I was like, this doesn't sit right with me. Didn't sit right with anyone that I talked to, but again, we didn't know how to handle it. We didn't know how we could go up against a massive organization like the USGA, and knowing that they had clearly just changed or recently changed a policy that was allowing transgender golfers. So when I went back to college, though, like I was playing college tournaments, so it wasn't happening at the college level. So kind of just kind of put it out of my mind. I was like, okay, I got to focus on playing, Lauren Miller's best golf. But then once I turned professional and you're begging, you're trying to find any opportunity you can to play, especially in the off season, since there's minimal tours that offer events in that November to March timeframe. And so when I saw NXXT offering events, I was like, I want to play. Like I need to play. I'm a competitor. I want to get better. And so I needed to get up. And as soon as I put my name in for that first event and saw the list of participants, I saw Haley's name and I was like, okay. And so I knew it was just kind of a matter of time before I got paired up with Haley, which, I wasn't looking forward to, because it is just, you're sitting there and you're like, this isn't right. Like this just isn't.
So
this
how
isn't
many
okay.
events did you play at NXX, of the tour events where you saw Haley playing? And had he been playing since you went? So I assume he'd been playing in tour events then from when you played him in 2021 up until then you graduated. So he was playing in there. So winning prize money and so forth in those tour events. Okay.
Yes, actually, so the tour was previously under different ownership and was called the East Coast Women's All Pro Tour. And I believe in 2022, Haley won on that tour. And again, I don't think people weren't really happy about it, but again, it wasn't getting seen by kind of mass media or a lot of kind of national attention. None of that. Yeah, I mean,
I'm surprised it didn't come out at all during the Leah Thomas stuff because
it might have still been before. I don't know the exact date on when it happened, but I think it might have been before, and that's why. But yeah, so I knew Haley was playing on that tour, and then new ownership came in and rebranded, and that's when it became NXXT. So they had run a couple tournaments prior to qualifying school back in August. But then they were offering a winter series. And so I played in the very first event of the winter series, as well as another 6 in January and March. So yeah, I came across Haley right off the bat.
So tell us about you have one event where you had to do a playoff with him. Can you talk to us about that? And then
yeah, definitely.
Because that's kind of where it all came to a head for you, right? Where you were just like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, no, for sure. I will say too, I had started kind of a little bit of a conversation amongst other girls on the tour. I had kind of a group of 2 to 3 friends that, we knew who Haley was. We weren't okay with it. And we had started to, we were trying to figure out how to communicate that in the right way. So we had reached out to kind of the tournament director of NXXT, and we're like, hey, when possible, we do not want to play with Haley. And just kind of saying like this, we're not okay with this. But we knew it was out of their hands a little bit, in the sense that they're following the guidelines of the LPGA and the USGA, and they're just a small mini tour following, I guess, Big Brother, if you want to call it that. And so, but we had said, when possible, like, if we could not play with Haley, that would be advised. And they heard us and were like, yeah, well, we can do that for the first round. After that, it's entirely based on how you play, which I understand. You have to do pairings based off of scores. So actually, the week prior to Haley and I's playoff, I got paired with Haley in the second round, and that was our first time playing together since 2021. And I was curious to see how Haley's game was going to be, because I had heard girls say, oh, Haley's not hitting it as far, all that stuff. So I was going to be interested to kind of compare what I had seen in 2021 versus what I was currently seeing, as well as just being a golfer for so long, you have an understanding of and I have an understanding of like the golf swing and ball flights and all this stuff. And so I was very surprised when I played with Haley and saw an extremely low ball flight, which is different because normally you're trying to maximize. And the way you maximize is not by hitting it low. It's by hitting it much higher, you get more carry, all of these things. And so I was like, that's interesting. It makes sense why you're hitting it shorter if you are hitting it that low. And to me, I didn't want to make any assumptions or anything, but I was like, to me, that's not 100%. You're not giving full effort on these golf shots. I'd see it come out in certain moments. I'd see kind of that advantage be utilized coming out of the rough, the extra grip strength and the extra forearm strength and the ability to produce more spin. But it appeared pretty strategic, kind of when Haley would utilize it.
That's something that I think is underappreciated in sports that have, like, I can relate to you on that when it comes to tennis, because so playing against men, the amount of spin that they're able to put on the ball just from wrist strength and grip strength, like it makes a huge difference. Huge. And I think it's underappreciated whenever there's a sport where your hand is on something, what a big difference grip strength makes, just in little motions, repetitive motions, quick motions. Anyway, hearing you point that out, like I can totally relate.
Yeah, because I think that's where most people want to go, is they run to the distance argument. Which yes, it is valid. Like I caddied this afternoon for 5 male golfers, and they all hit it way further than I ever will. And so I recognize that is a part of it, but there is so much more to it. And that's what that's kind of, but that's all Haley would want to go to. Well, I don't hit it as far. I don't hit it as far. I've lost all this distance, and
that drives me crazy.
It's easily like you can so easily manipulate that. Like I can hit the ball 200 yards, or I can hit it 260 yards.
It also drives me crazy though, Lauren, because to have men walking around saying, I am less of an athlete now, I am weaker, and so therefore I am fine to play with women. And you have women who have spent their entire life trying to maximize how far they can hit it, training, pushing every boundary, eating everything right. So it's like, it's this insult to these elite female athletes who have worked so hard to get to this level and have this natural talent and drive to say, oh, this man has hamstrung himself enough that he can be equivalent to you. I don't think people wrap their heads around what an insult that is to female accomplishments. to what a woman is capable of doing, and that we are justified in wanting to be able to celebrate what we are capable of and not compare it to any version of a man, whether he's sick or been on, any kind of medication that would weaken his strength, or he's been on chemotherapy. That is a male development path, not optimizing
Yes.
performance for women. So what you're saying, yes, it's
Yeah.
really frustrating to have. I saw the same thing with Leah Thomas. He's like, look, my times are so much slower. And it's like, I don't want to hear you say that. It's like a man saying, watch, I can run backwards next to you in the track and we'll be comparable. Like, it's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. It is incredibly frustrating when I'm spending, hundreds of dollars on a speed training program to increase my speed, to hit it further. Like I'm doing everything I can to find these extra yards because I know how valuable they are. And, on Haley's like, well, let me continue to kind of decrease. And, Haley even said it. Haley even admitted in an interview that, a couple years ago, Haley had this huge advantage and was like, but I'm not going to play. I'm going to wait until my advantage has continued to decrease until I am now worse than I was a couple years ago. So now it's okay for me to play. And I was just like, you just admitted it yourself that men and women are different and you have advantages and those don't just go away, or you don't get the excuse to just try less and that now makes you, acceptable in
Well, and it
the
also
women's
drives me
category.
nuts because the equivalent argument could be made to say, like, we're going to give men really bad golf clubs and we'll give women really good golf clubs. So then they can compete against each other. And it's like, first of all, you're not going to get that titration right because the advantages can't be compared. But to sit there and say we're going to mitigate or allow some kind of handicap in order to be equivalent to women we don't do that for our kids or for any other, changing of category. It drives me nuts. Okay, let's get back on the subject here. Sorry. So, can you go on now about the experience where things came to a head for you? Just give us the quick story of what happened.
Definitely. So like I mentioned, Haley and I had played the week before, so started to get an understanding of how far Haley was hitting it and all that stuff. So go the following week, and I would like to note Haley actually lost by 1 the previous week. And so we were actually really curious to see, I think this would have might potentially have all kind of come to a head a week sooner had Haley won that event. But Haley came really close to winning, but it did not go Haley's way. So I think that I'll show its relevance here in a little. But ultimately, it's the following week, and I get paired with Haley the second and third round. So now I have played over the previous 2 weeks a total of 54 holes with Haley. So I have a great understanding of Haley's ball flight, how far Haley's hitting it, all of this stuff. And ultimately, with 2 holes left in regulation, I had a 3-shot lead. I had tournament 1. I had it in my pocket. All I had to do was finish out strong. And now I look back and I say God had other plans. Because I was sitting in the middle of the fairway on the 17th hole when a shot that I've hit a million times in my life, and just had a simple wedge in my hand and hit a horrible shot and just duffed it right in the water, which you could give me 100 more golf balls and I wouldn't do it again. And I ended up making double. So now my lead decreases from 3 to 1. And we go to the 18th hole. Haley and I both hit good tee shots in the fairway. And Haley hits first. And, people, if you don't know golf, that's okay. But I'll try to set the scene in that it was about 45 degrees, so very cold, which means you're not able to get as much compression on the ball, so not able to spin it as much. And it's a front pin downwind. So this is a very, very difficult pin to get close to. Haley hits first and hits this ball a mile in the air, and it lands like a butterfly and goes to 3 feet. And Haley kind of not screamed, but like outwardly kind of expressed some strong language in excitement of a good shot. And I was a little bit taken aback. I was like, oh, that's kind of a different side that I haven't quite seen. I get up, I hit my shot, it lands on the front of the green and rolls 30 feet past because I can't spin it as much as Haley can, or hit it as high. So, I know Haley has a 3-footer. I have a 30-footer. I burn the edge, I miss my putt, Haley makes, so we're tied. And now we go to the playoff. It happens, pretty shortly after, so we're still warmed up and fresh. And I get up first, I hit my tee shot, and Haley gets up. And when I tell you, I still can't honestly believe what I saw. It was the visible difference of 10 to 15 miles per hour faster clubhead speed from a hole ago. And I know Haley said, I swung out of my shoes. And I'm like, I wish I could swing out of my shoes and gain an extra 10 to 15 yards. But I really think I started to see kind of that Haley didn't want to lose again. Haley had just lost the week before. Haley now has a chance to win, and all bets were off. And so now instead of being, 10 yards past me, which Haley was on average from my understanding of the previous 54 holes I've just played, I would say Haley was 10 yards past me. Hit one that flew 50 yards past me, was 20 to 25 yards further than where Haley was playing the previous 2 rounds. And now has the opportunity to go for a par 5 and 2 that Haley had not previously been able to go for. And so I was just completely shocked I had kind of been wondering if there was that extra gear. I was pretty confident that there was, but I wasn't seeing it. And then it finally came out when, in that playoff when the pressure was on. So Haley ultimately, we ended up tying that hole. We both made birdie. And then on the second hole, again, Haley hit a tee shot much higher, than I had seen, and swing was much faster. And ultimately Haley beat me on that hole. And, initially I was just incredibly, disappointed with myself because I knew I had the tournament won. It would have been my first professional win, and it didn't come together for me. But I was also having people console me and be like, Nars, you won that tournament. There should not have been a man competing against you, and that tournament should have been yours. And kind of from that day when that happened, I was like, oh, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And so even though it was since 2021 that I was like, I'm not okay with this, whether Haley finishes 10th or first, like it's not right. Having, been directly impacted, having fully seen the advantage that Haley has, and ultimately just recognizing that I didn't want any more, other professional women athletes who worked so hard to have to go through.
Did Haley
losing.
how much, like, what's the difference between the prize money that Haley ended up winning there versus you? Is it significant?
On this level, it was, I think, probably a difference of $1,000, which is,
but it's also
obviously this level is small, but
well, it's small. It's $1,000, and it's
$1,000 is $1,000.
And it is also, it's also that he took an opportunity for another woman to even take home prize money.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention your first place. So after this, I remember the headlines coming out that Haley won this tournament. And then it was, you decided, okay, I'll talk to media, right? After that, is that right?
So yeah, ultimately I was driving home from the tournament, and I remember kind of texting one of my best friends and being like, I can't stay quiet anymore. Like I have to find a way to, go about this in the right way to bring change. I didn't want to just like go, and I was like, this isn't even really about Haley. I was like, I'm just so frustrated with the principal. I'm so frustrated with USGA. I'm so frustrated with LPGA. I was like, how do I say things that, or how do I go about it in a way that is meaningful and helpful? I
Productive.
was like, I have no interest in going and just yelling or blaming Haley for beating me. I was like, that's not at all what this is about.
Right.
And I actually specifically, I wasn't aware of y'all. Otherwise, I would have mentioned y'all. But I literally texted my friend and I said, I need to get in touch with Riley Gaines. I was like, I need to talk to Riley and figure out what the heck, I can do to just kind of help this movement. And so through a ton of just prayer, and talking with my family, I started to look up just women's organizations, specifically, women's sports organizations, and figure out a way to share my story, share what happened, and just find a way. Because ultimately, what really hit me was that if I, as someone who's been directly impacted by this, don't show people that I'm not okay with it, why should I expect anyone else to care?
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, for me, if I choose to just sit quiet and take it, then I'm basically saying I'm okay with it. I'm enabling it. And I was like, that's not what I want. I'm not okay with it. I care so much about the future of women's sports. If, I hope to have a daughter one day and I want her to be able to play women's sports. And I
Yeah.
don't want them to, I don't want them to be erased. And so it was kind of all of those things kind of playing into it. And one of the first things I did though was even reach out to my professor of my gender and sport class at Mississippi State because he was so knowledgeable and just a really good resource for me and someone that I knew I could turn to and would offer me kind of the right way to go about it. And he gave me some just really great advice and encouragement and pointed me to articles. And one
And
thing
that's
that he said to me that
fantastic.
I'll probably take with me for the rest of my life because I know it'll apply to any other issues is he told me, he said, Lauren, he's like, you're fighting for truth. And he's like, that is a fight that is always worth fighting for.
Mm.
And he's like, even if it feels like you're losing, he's like, do not give in. He's like, I promise, like, it is something that you just have to continue to go for because it is worth it.
I'm
And
so glad that you had some really stellar support people behind you.
yeah,
I'm hoping that you can give I mean, I think courage calls to courage. I think everyone's building on the backs of those that have come before. And
mhm.
um, you know, it's just we still run into people who are frightened to take a stand or who are frightened to get involved in defending their rights, whether it's in a lawsuit or in advocating before their governing body or in just speaking out to their local government officials or their school board. I'm hoping that you can provide some kind of encouragement and pass on both to female athletes, to their parents, to people just in the public who see this going on and want to make a difference. What kind of reception have you gotten? What's been difficult, but why do you, I mean, I'm assuming, because you're here, you don't regret ever speaking out. You're glad for the changes you've been able to
Yeah.
make. And I'm just hoping you can pass on some words of encouragement, like find the guts, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I took so much strength from, getting in touch with both of y'all and hearing, your stories and everything you guys have done and continue to do for women's sports as a whole. That definitely empowered me, talking, just even texting back and forth with Riley or talking with different people and just seeing kind of their bravery and courage and that, what we're doing is meaningful, is important, is making progress, even though we don't feel like it. And I think too, we all know this is a fight that like we're on the right side of, that we're gonna win. It's just how long is it gonna take us to get there? But like
Yeah.
we will get there. And I have been certainly blown away and super thankful for from the moment I decided to kind of do something publicly, do an article with Golf Week, do an article with Independent Women's Forum, and put it out in a place where my peers would see it. I was overwhelmed with positive feedback after positive comments after, I mean, so many people that I don't even talk to on a regular basis, either, you know, just reaching out to me and saying, thank you. Thank you for saying something. It's what we've all been thinking. It's what the conversations we have amongst ourselves and our community, but we're scared. But we appreciate you using your voice. We appreciate you telling your story. Like, we're with you, we back you. And I think that's what I've really seen is people are willing to stand when there's someone in front of them.
Mhm.
And, I'm certainly grateful for, you and Marshy and just everyone involved with Icons, as well as Riley being willing to like take that first step, and kind of giving us, legs to stand on. Um, and yeah, I truly just have received so much support. It's scary. I had people tell me like, are you sure you want to do this? You might lose sponsors. You might lose, people might not be interested in working with you in the future. And I was like, this isn't about me. Like, this is my one career in the big scheme of things is irrelevant to the big picture. I was like, if people don't want to work with me because of what I'm saying or what I stand for, then I don't know if that's a company I'm interested in working with anyways.
Yeah,
And
I
so
say that all the time, just to reiterate you, like we can't have shame in standing up for ourselves and in standing up for our daughters. It is okay
yeah,
to defend women's rights. And to say women deserve fair treatment should not be a difficult thing to say.
yeah,
End of story.
exactly.
So
Period.
I agree with you. I also think there you're right that it's people are willing to stand up when they see someone standing in front of them, and it's like sometimes you just need someone to take you by the elbow and say, "I'm with you, sister." You know.
Yeah,
So
no, for sure. I definitely. I think, people they hear that term cancel culture, and I
it's
really don't
intimidating.
think it, but I honestly don't even really think that it applies in this area. I think there's such a
Yeah.
huge majority of people on our side. It's just that 5% have been so vocal and have been so loud that people have been intimidated. Um, but that was definitely what I found was even just speaking out on a smaller scale, I received probably 50 messages and another 100 people that just like liked, kind of what I had put out. And I'm sure there were probably others who, thought the same. And so that's just what I saw. I haven't had a single conversation with other, women professional golfers that have fought me on this. I think they all see it. Even, talking to girls who are friendly with Haley, I didn't know what they would say. I, assumed they would kind of go to bat for Haley. And they've come up to me and said, "Hey, I really respect how you've gone about this. Like, you're right. And, these things do need to be changed." And so even hearing that from people who know Haley, it's like they're still seeing that truth and fairness and
It
integrity
matters.
are so important.
Mhm.
Especially with golf. I think that was another thing that just struck a nerve with me is golf is founded on this idea of accountability and integrity and the accountability to oneself. Like we have minimal officials. Like if you break a rule, it's on you to call it. Like it happened to me a few tournaments ago. You're not allowed to use a feature on your rangefinder, and I went up, I shot the yardage, and that feature was turned on, and it's a two-stroke penalty. No one would know if you don't call yourself on it. But I looked at my playing partner, said, "Hey, this happened. It's a two-stroke penalty. I made a 6 on this hole." And it's like that's what's ingrained in all of us. That's what's understood. Otherwise, the sport of golf falls apart
It
if that
needs to be
element doesn't
ingrained in every
exist.
sport to an extent. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we do count on that a little bit, but this is why officiating is such a big deal. You know, doping, all the rules that are
Mhm.
there are to help hold you accountable. But we as athletes need to hold each other accountable, and we need to hold our governing bodies accountable
Yep.
to have our backs and to do the right thing and keep the integrity in the sports we care so deeply about, because it is, as I mean, just hearing you express all this, it is about doing the right thing in life. And that's
Mhm.
part of what sports teaches us, how to maximize ourselves, how to take care of ourselves, how to be fair, how to be just, how to do
Mhm.
the right thing when you want so badly to win, or when you're exhausted, or when you're angry, like keeping yourself in check. These are the skills that we need. And the ethics of sport, I mean, without the ethics of sport, we lose it. We lose sport. So, okay, I want to talk to, I want to mention that we know the NXXT tour leaders, and they have now corrected their policy. Haley is not able to play on there. It is a women's tour for women. And they were so excited about the vibe and the atmosphere. And I wanted, after, you know, when the rules changed, more women were coming to play. They were getting a lot more enrollment. And I think this is great evidence for us to take on to other realms of sport, to say, like, yeah, when the rules are fair, the women want to come. And when the rules aren't fair, we are ultimately losing out on female athletes. We are kicking people out of the sport just because they don't want to be there. So I wanted to have you talk a little bit about what that atmospheric change was like, and, you know, is it feel like a fun place to play now? Just tell us a little bit about the change.
Yeah, no, it was huge. I am so incredibly thankful for the entire NXXT team and all of the countless hours that they put into finding the best way forward, finding a way to support the women playing on the tour, right? Like, we need to work in harmony, right, for both to succeed and both to thrive. And so them, you know, having the player survey, hearing us out, hearing what we had to say, and actually doing something with it and bringing action, I think was huge. So, you know, I went to that first event after the policy change, and I definitely, you know, felt it of just girls also starting to find their voice a little bit. Maybe not quite on a public scale, but even just conversations with each other.
Oh, that's good.
You know, there was a girl that I was playing with that I knew was, like I said, friendly with Haley, and I wasn't sure what she'd have to say to me after knowing that I was public. I wasn't sure if she would kind of just not talk about it at all, or be like, how could you say this? Or, you know, anything like that. Like, you've hurt Haley's career. Like, I had no clue. And I'd also heard rumors that she was okay with Haley playing on the tour. So I had, you know, I was not really quite sure. And she literally told me during the round, she was like, you know, I might be friendly with Haley, but that it doesn't make it okay. And so
We
her
need to
kind of being
separate
willing
those.
more. Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
you're not trying to hate on someone, but
No.
we've got to be able to protect women. And if that
Mhm.
means using clear language, that means defending our rights, it means sticking up for the rules, it means being honest that we don't think it's fair and we
Yeah.
don't think it's right. That's not hating on
Mhm.
anyone. That's standing up
Mhm.
for women.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
cool to hear that it was a better environment.
Yeah.
So last question, because we're running out of time here. It's been a long conversation. I have so
Sorry.
many other questions for you. But I want to know, you know, the LPGA and the USGA have not updated their policies in spite of this. And you mentioned when we were chatting before getting started tonight that Haley is playing in a qualifier to continue competing at some of the biggest events on the women's professional golf tour. Tell us a little bit about that, just quickly. And then I know that the LPGA doesn't want to deal with Davidson. They also don't want to change their policy. What do you think we need to do, or what is the path forward in golf? Gathering more steam? Yeah, who do we advocate with? Do you have some ideas or thoughts on that? And if you
Yeah,
don't, that's fine too.
no, for sure. I really, really, really wish the LPGA would do what the NXXT did and to have an anonymous player survey, because I think they would realize so quickly how many girls on their tour are in agreement with us. I think they would get the results back, and they would see, like, we are gonna, you know, continue to maintain support from our players and our members, that, you know, they do not want to compete against men. However, the LPGA is just very timid, and I think they're really nervous of a lawsuit. When, you know, after kind of continuing to educate myself on how we got here, it's them being afraid of a lawsuit and them kind of
They're
stressing
afraid of a
over the
lawsuit from,
financials.
they're afraid of a lawsuit from Haley, right?
Yes.
So this is where we need to make them afraid of a
And that's
lawsuit from
ultimately why
women.
they changed their policy in the first place. Because Haley was threatening to sue back in 2021, and
Mm.
instead of kind of standing up and fighting it, they just caved. And so that's kind of been, unfortunately, the LPGA's kind of MO is when it comes to finances, they're just have been a little weak and haven't quite had that backbone needed. And so I'm, hopeful that there are, women out there, and I think that are trying to advocate and are trying to help the LPGA understand that, you know, a lawsuit would be coming potentially either way, right? Like if you continue to sit on your hands and do nothing, and it may not be Haley, but it'll be if someone else comes along and makes the LPGA, if I'm that player that loses my card because Haley gets one, I'm suing. I'm saying, you're excluding women. And a card has been taken from me and given to a man. So I think they're just really hoping it never gets to them. But
Well,
in
I'm going to
reality,
be we're going to work with you and follow up on this event that Haley is participating in to qualify for that, because I think we've
yeah,
got to, as someone just said, how can a lawsuit be created when this is so wrong? We are looking for avenues to do that actively. We're trying to figure it
yeah,
out. So, okay, well, we want to let Marshy get onto the news, but real quick, let me just look at the Q&A questions we have here. I think the best one is to ask you is, what will it take for more female athletes to speak up or boycott? And I think in the golf world, when it comes to the LPGA, I think we need more women to speak up and be willing to take on a lawsuit or something like that if it comes. Do you think you're close on that? Do you think women are
yeah.
getting,
So I
like,
think
they're reaching
the
here?
yeah, so I think the hardest part um in getting girls to speak out at the lower level is that we don't have a ton of opportunities to play. So that was kind of what I was encountering when I was talking to girls that, were playing on NXXT, is they're like, yeah, we'd love to make a stand, but then we don't get to play. We don't get reps. We don't have competition. It's not like we have another tour playing right down the road that we can go compete in that has a different policy. And so I think, lack of events played a big part in people just not feeling comfortable to make that, public stand and say, nope, I won't tee it up. And two, again, I really think that girls on the LPGA level are really nervous when it comes to sponsors, knowing the just how important sponsors are in kind of funding your career. From what I've been told, a lot of what the LPGA has sold their sponsors on is DEI.
Yeah,
And so
it's a
that's kind of
conflict. Yeah.
they've like really pressed that with the LPGA, and they've kind of really pushed that in multiple avenues. And that's kind of what they've sold sponsors on, is like, oh, we're the super inclusive um, tour. And I think that's ultimately kind of scaring girls. Um, and yeah, I think it's just they're nervous to be controversial.
It's
And I think
amazing
they're
that anyone would think it's controversial to support women.
right.
But okay, we do.
I know.
I've got to thank you so much, Lauren,
Yeah,
for all of your insight and sharing your story. This is fantastic. Hang around if people want to put their questions in. Well, I'm going to let Marshy pop on and go over what's been happening in the news. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Lauren. It's
of
awesome
course.
to hear
Thank
from
you.
you.